Jared Munro Fraser was a small, spare, black-eyed man who bore more than a passing resemblance to his distant cousin, Murtor, the Fraser clansman who had accompanied us to Le Havre. When I first saw Jared, standing majestically in the gaping doors of his warehouse so that streams of longshoremen carrying casks were forced to go around him, the resemblance was strong enough that I blinked and rubbed my eyes. Murtor, so far as I knew, was still at the inn attending a lame horse. Jared had the same lank dark hair and piercing eyes, the same sinewy monkey-like frame. But there all resemblance stopped, and as we drew closer, Jamie gallantly clearing a path for me through the mob with elbows and shoulders, I could see the differences as well. Jared's face was oblong rather than hatchet-shaped, with a cheerful snub nose that effectively ruined the dignified air conferred at a distance by his excellent tailoring and upright carriage. A successful merchant rather than a cattle raider, he also knew how to smile, unlike Murtor, whose natural expression was one of unrelieved dourness, and a broad grin of welcome broke out on his face as we were jostled and shoved up the ramp into his presence. "My dear!" he exclaimed, clutching me by the arm and yanking me deftly out of the way of two burly stevedores rolling a gigantic cask through the huge door. "So pleased to see you at last." The cask bumped noisily on the boards of the ramp, and I could hear the rolling slosh of its contents as it passed me. "You can treat rum like that," Jared observed, watching the ungainly progress of the enormous barrel through the obstructions of the warehouse, "but not port. I always fetch that up myself, along with the bottled wines. In fact, I was just setting off to see to a new shipment of Belle Rouge port. Would you perhaps be interested in accompanying me?" I glanced at Jamie, who nodded, and we set off at once in Jared's wake, sidestepping the rumbling traffic of casks and hogsheads, carts and barrows, and men and boys of all descriptions carrying bolts of fabric, boxes of grain and foodstuffs, rolls of hammered copper, sacks of flour, and anything else that could be transported by ship. Le Havre was an important centre of shipping traffic, and the docks were the heart of the city. A long, solid wharf ran nearly a quarter-mile round the edge of the harbour, with smaller docks protruding from it, along which were anchored three-masted barks and brigantines, dories and small galleys, a full range of the ships that provisioned France. Jamie kept a firm hold on my elbow, the better to yank me out of the way of oncoming handcarts, rolling casks, and careless merchants and seamen, who were inclined not to look where they were going, but rather to depend on sheer momentum to see them through the scrum of the docks. As we made our way down the quay, Jared shouted genteelly into my ear on the other side, pointing out objects of interest as we passed, and explaining the history and ownership of the various ships in a staccato, disjointed manner. The Ariana, which we were on our way to see, was in fact one of Jared's own ships. Ships, I gathered, might belong to a single owner, more often to a company of merchants who owned them collectively, or, occasionally, to a captain who contracted his vessel, crew, and services for a voyage. Seeing the number of company-owned vessels compared to the relatively few owned by individuals, I began to form a very respectful idea of Jared's worth. The Ariana was in the middle of an anchored row near a large warehouse with the name Fraser painted on it in sloping, whitewashed letters. Seeing the name gave me an odd little thrill, a sudden feeling of alliance and belonging with the realization that I shared that name, and with it an acknowledged kinship with those who bore it. The Ariana was a three-masted ship, perhaps 60 feet long, with a wide bow. There were two cannon on the side of the ship that faced the dock.